The grand hall of the Valthorian Empire was filled with voices. Nobles in fine robes and decorated warriors stood in neat lines, their eyes fixed on the long golden carpet that led to the emperor's throne. Banners of deep blue and silver hung from the tall pillars, each marked with the empire's crest. Today was the start of the Imperial Alliance trials, a rare event where the strongest warriors from across the galaxy would compete for a place in the Emperor's Guard. Princess Elira stood near her father's side, her hands clasped tightly in front of her. Her pale lavender skin and dark silver hair shone under the light coming through the high glass ceiling. She looked calm to the crowd, but her heart was uneasy. The trials always brought warriors of many races, and though she had seen strange beings before, today's gathering felt different. The hall quieted as the Imperial announcer stepped forward. His voice carried through the air, naming each warrior as they entered. Towering reptilian soldiers, insectoid fighters with shining armor plates, and sleek feline hunters walked past the throne, bowing to the Emperor before taking their place. Each one looked strong, confident, and ready for battle. Then the announcer's voice changed. From the outer colonies, representing the human territories, Captain Darius Kane, a tall figure, entered. His armor was not shining or decorated like the others. It was dark and worn, marked with scratches from old battles. A heavy cloak hung from his shoulders. His face was calm, almost expressionless, but his eyes were sharp, scanning the hall, with quiet focus. Unlike the other warriors, he walked with no hurry, his steps steady, almost too steady, as if measuring the ground beneath him. Elira's breath caught, her chest tightened, and she turned quickly toward her father. "Not him, father," she whispered, her voice shaking. "I'm afraid of that human warrior." The Emperor's brow rose slightly, but his voice was calm. "And why, my daughter?" She glanced back at the human. "I know his name. They tell stories of him. How he destroyed an entire fleet by himself during the border war. How he left nothing but ruins. I don't want him near me." The Emperor leaned closer, speaking low so only she could hear. "Fear and truth are not the same. If his skill is as they say, then he will be useful to the Empire. You must watch and decide for yourself." But Elira turned away, not wanting to meet the human's eyes. Darius reached the front of the hall, bowing respectfully. "Before the Emperor, Your Majesty," he said simply, his voice low but steady. He did not look around, nor did he seek approval from the crowd. It was as if their judgment did not matter to him. Whispers spread among the nobles. "A human? Here? Do they think brute force is enough for the trials? Dangerous, reckless creatures." The Emperor silenced the hall with a single gesture. "Welcome, warriors, in the coming days. Your strength, skill, and honor will be tested. Only those who prove themselves will stand in the Imperial Guard." As the warriors were led away to their quarters, Elira watched Darius disappear down the corridor. She tried to push the unease from her mind, but the image of his steady gaze lingered. There was no arrogance in it, no anger, only a quiet weight, as if he had seen too much and carried it with him. Later that day, the princess found herself walking through the palace gardens to clear her thoughts. The air was fresh, filled with the scent of flowering trees. She passed by the training grounds where the warriors were testing their weapons. The clang of steel and the hum of energy blades filled the air. She paused when she saw Darius there. He stood alone at the far end of the grounds, his armor removed, wearing only a simple training suit. In his hands was a standard Imperial practice spear. He moved with slow, precise motions, striking at the air, spinning the weapon, and shifting his stance with perfect balance. There was no wasted movement, no show of power, only efficiency. Two other alien warriors, both large and heavily armored, stepped onto the grounds. One of them called out, "Human, they say you fought in the border war. Was it true you destroyed a fleet? Darius didn't stop his movements. I fought in the war, he replied simply. The other alien laughed. And they fear you for that? Let's see if you're worth the stories. Without warning, both charged at him. Elira gasped. This was against the rules outside of official trials. But before she could speak, Darius moved. He sidestepped the first strike, turning the spear to deflect the second, using the momentum to spin and disarm the first warrior in one motion. Then he struck the ground near the second warrior's foot, forcing him to stop. He did not injure them. He simply ended the fight before it could truly begin. The two aliens looked at him, breathing hard. Darius handed the spear back to one of them without a word and walked away. Elira felt her fear shift slightly. She still remembered the stories, but what she had just seen was not the work of a reckless brute. It was control. Calm, precise control. And that made him even harder to understand. As she returned to the palace halls, she couldn't stop thinking about what her father had said. Fear and truth are not the same. But then, why did she still feel her heartbeat quicken whenever the human warrior's eyes passed over her? The first day of the trials was yet to come. But already the princess felt that this human's presence was going to change more than just the outcome of the competition. It might change how she saw her own place in the galaxy. The next morning, the Imperial Alliance trials began. The training grounds had been transformed into a vast arena, with the Emperor, Princess Illyra, and high-ranking nobles seated high above. The air was filled with the sound of drums and the hum of anticipation. Warriors from every corner of the galaxy stood ready for the first challenge. The announcer's voice echoed through the space. Trial 1. The Gauntlet. A test of speed, skill, and survival. Each warrior must navigate the course alone, facing traps, shifting terrain, and mechanical beasts. The goal is simple. Reach the other side. One by one, warriors entered the gauntlet. Some dashed forward with energy and strength, others moved with caution. The crowd roared when fighters leaped over spiked pits, dodged swinging blades, and destroyed the mechanical predators that attacked from the shadows. When Darius Kane's turn came, the murmurs in the crowd grew louder. Princess Elira kept her eyes on him, unsure if she was hoping for him to fail or succeed. He stepped into the gauntlet without ceremony. The gates closed behind him, and the first trap activated, a storm of spinning blades crossing the narrow path. Instead of rushing, Darius watched the movement of the blades carefully, studying their rhythm. When he moved, it was with perfect timing, slipping through gaps as if he had memorized the pattern. Elira noticed he wasted no energy. He did not leap dramatically or make unnecessary movements. He only did what was needed. Next came a section of the course with shifting platforms over boiling water. Many before him had sprinted and almost fallen. Darius crouched low, keeping his balance with every step, moving like the ground itself was an enemy to be read and understood. The final challenge was a massive mechanical beast with steel claws and glowing eyes. Other warriors had destroyed theirs quickly, earning cheers. Darius, however, did something different. When the machine lunged, he sidestepped and struck its legs, disabling its movement instead of destroying it entirely. Then he calmly walked past it. The crowd was confused. Some thought he was showing weakness by not finishing the fight. Others saw something else, efficiency. Princess Elira leaned slightly toward her father. He could have destroyed it. Why didn't he? The Emperor smiled faintly. Because sometimes the point is not to destroy, but to overcome. Destruction is easy. Control is harder. By the end of the first trial, Darius's time was not the fastest, but it was flawless. No wasted movement, no injury, no panic. The F. Officials noted this with interest. Later, during the midday break, the warriors gathered in the shaded rest area. Conversations were low, but Darius sat apart, leaning against a pillar. A younger alien warrior, curious but wary, approached him. Human. The stories say you wiped out a fleet during the border war. Is it true? Darius's eyes flickered briefly before returning to calm. The fleet was destroyed. That is true. But stories are not always told in full. The young warrior tilted his head. Then tell it. Darius was silent for a moment, as if deciding whether it was worth speaking. We were ordered to stop an invading force before it reached a civilian world. My squad was the closest. The fleet outnumbered us 10-1. The only way to stop them was to take out their fuel reserves. I gave the order. Their ships went up one after another. But there were transports mixed in. Not all of them were soldiers. The young warrior swallowed hard. So you regret it? Darius's jaw tightened. Regret doesn't change the past. It only changes how you act. In the future, Princess Elira, hidden behind one of the pillars nearby, heard every word. She felt a strange weight in her chest. The image she had of him as a cold, unfeeling destroyer didn't match the voice she heard now. Low, steady, carrying something, heavier than pride. The second trial began after the break. This time, it was the Arena Challenge, a test of combat skill against live opponents. Warriors were paired randomly, and the victor was the one who could disarm or disable their opponent. Darius's first opponent was a massive reptilian soldier with armor that shimmered under the sun. The fight began with the reptilian charging, forward, swinging a heavy warhammer. Darius dodged each blow, never blocking head-on, always moving just enough to avoid the strike. After several exchanges, Darius stepped inside the reptilian's guard, caught the hammer's handle, and twisted it sharply. The weapon clattered to the ground. Instead of striking his opponent down, Darius stepped back and offered the weapon back to him. The crowd was silent for a moment, then murmured. This was not the usual display of dominance they expected. The Emperor glanced at his daughter. "Do you see? He does not fight to humiliate. He fights to win, and then to walk away." Her voice was quiet. "It's different from what I imagined." Round after round, Darius advanced through the arena challenge, never injuring his opponents. More than necessary. He disarmed them, forced them to yield, and moved on without celebration. By the end of the day, he stood among the top contenders. As the warriors left the arena, Elira found herself walking behind him in the palace corridors. He did not seem to notice her, but she spoke anyway. "Why do you fight like that?" He stopped, turning slightly toward her. "Like what?" "You don't finish your enemies when you can. You don't strike unless you must." His gaze was steady. "Because I've seen what happens when you go too far, and I don't want to go there again." Elira felt her chest tighten again, but it wasn't fear this time. It was something else, something she couldn't yet name. She looked away quickly. "The next trial will be harder." "I expect it will," he replied simply before walking away. That night, as the torches lit the palace walls and the sounds of distant music filled the air, Elira lay in her chambers, staring at the ceiling. She thought of his steady movements, his calm voice, and the weight in his eyes when he spoke of the past. She had feared him because of what she thought she knew. Now she feared something else, that she might have been wrong. The trials still had days to go, but already the human warrior's presence was changing the way she saw the galaxy and herself. The third day of the Imperial Alliance trials began before sunrise. The sky above the palace was painted in soft shades of blue and gold as warriors gathered in the assembly yard. This trial was known as the Jungle Run, a test of survival, tracking, and endurance. The announcer's voice carried over the crowd. "The Jungle Run will take place in the Crimson Wilds. You will face dangerous terrain, unpredictable weather, and hostile creatures. Only those who reach the extraction point will pass. Princess Elira was not supposed to be part of the challenge, but her father had given her a task. "You will observe this trial, my daughter," the Emperor had told her the night before. "See with your own eyes how each warrior moves when danger is real." She had wanted to refuse, especially after learning Darius would be part of the same mission, but she couldn't go against her father's command. The warriors were flown to the edge of the Crimson Wilds, a dense alien jungle where towering trees, with red leaves, blocked most of the sunlight. Thick vines hung like ropes, and the air was heavy with the scent of wet earth and flowers. Elira was with a small group of royal observers, guarded by elite palace soldiers. They would follow a separate path, watching the warriors' progress through scanning drones. The signal to begin echoed through the trees, and the warriors disappeared into the thick undergrowth. At first, everything seemed calm. The sounds of insects and distant animal calls filled the air. Darius moved through the jungle with steady precision, never rushing, always scanning his surroundings. Other warriors crashed through the bushes or climbed over roots quickly, but Darius chose paths that kept him hidden from predators. Elira, watching from a distance, noticed this. "He moves like he's listening to the forest," she whispered without realizing it. But then, the calm shattered. From deep in the trees came a loud, guttural roar. The ground shook slightly as a massive beast pushed through the undergrowth. Its body covered in armored scales, its mouth filled with rows of sharp teeth. The royal guards quickly formed a defensive line around the observers. "Stay back, princess!" one of them shouted. The beast charged, scattering smaller animals as it crashed toward them. The guards fired energy bolts, but the creature barely slowed. One strike from its tail sent two, soldiers flying into the bushes. Elira's heart pounded. The beast's eyes locked on her, and it lowered its head to charge again. Before it could, a figure burst through the foliage. Darius. He didn't hesitate. He grabbed one of the fallen guard's spears and planted himself between the beast and the princess. "Move back!" he barked, his voice carrying over the chaos. The beast lunged. Darius sidestepped at the last second, driving the spear into the joint of its front leg. The creature roared in pain, thrashing wildly. Vines snapped under its weight, but the spear broke, leaving Darius with only the jagged end. When the beast turned again, he didn't run. He ran toward it. He leapt onto its back, driving the broken spear into the gaps in its armor. The creature bucked and rolled, trying to throw him off, but he held on. Finally, he jammed the spear deep into a weak point behind its neck. With a final shudder, the beast collapsed, shaking the ground. The jungle went quiet again. Elira stared, breathing hard. Darius climbed off the creature, his clothes torn, a cut bleeding on his arm. He walked toward her, checking her over quickly. "You're not hurt?" She shook her head. "No, because of you." He gave a short nod. "Good. Stay with the guards. The jungle's not done yet." Before she could respond, he turned and began checking the area, making sure no other predators were near. The royal guards helped the injured back to their feet, but it was clear they had been shaken by the attack. Elira kept her eyes on Darius. He moved with the same calm precision she had seen in the trials, but there was something different now. Something fierce, protective. As they continued toward the extraction point, the path grew more dangerous. Heavy rain began to fall, making the ground slick. Deep mud pulled at their boots, and thorn-covered vines blocked their way. At one point, the princess slipped on a wet slope. Before she could fall into a ravine, a hand caught her wrist. Darius again. He pulled her back with surprising strength. "Careful," he said, his tone steady. "The jungle takes anyone who isn't paying attention." She managed a small smile. "I'll try to remember that." Hours later, they reached the extraction point. The surviving warriors and observers were gathered there, waiting for the shuttle to arrive. Elira stood apart for a moment, watching Darius. He sat on a rock, cleaning the cut on his arm, not seeking attention or praise. She walked over, her steps slow. "You didn't have to save me. The guards could have—" "The guards were down," he said simply, not looking up. "And I was closer. But why? I was afraid of you. I even told my father not to let you near me." This time, he looked at her. His eyes were calm, but there was a shadow in them. "What you think of me doesn't change what's right. You were in danger. That was all that mattered." Elira didn't know what to say. For the first time, her fear felt misplaced. The shuttle arrived and they returned to the palace. But even as the noise of the city surrounded her again, the image of the human warrior standing between her and that monster stayed in her mind. She didn't understand him, not yet. But she knew one thing for certain. The next time she saw danger, she would not see Darius Kane as the man to fear. She would see him as the man who had saved her life. Night had fallen over the Valthorian capital. The palace glowed softly under the moonlight, its tall towers reflecting the silver light onto the gardens below. The sounds of the day had faded, leaving only the quiet hum of the city far in the distance. Princess Elira walked slowly through the lantern-lit corridors, her thoughts heavy. It had been hours since the jungle trial, yet the memory of the human warrior standing between her and the beast was still vivid. She could still hear his voice telling her to move back, still see the calm in his eyes, even as the creature's claws tore the air. She had told herself it was just duty, that any warrior would have done the same. But deep inside, she knew that wasn't true. There had been something in the way he had acted. No hesitation, no calculation, just pure instinct to protect. As she turned a corner, she saw him. Darius was in the outer courtyard, sitting alone near a small fountain. His armor was off, replaced by a plain training shirt and trousers. He was sharpening a short blade, the sound of metal sliding over stone breaking the silence. She hesitated, then stepped forward. "You're still awake." He glanced up briefly before returning to his work. Couldn't sleep. Some habits stay after war. Elira sat on the stone bench across from him. For a long moment, neither spoke. The water in the fountain trickled quietly between them. Finally, she said, "I heard more of the story today. About the border war." His movements slowed slightly, but he didn't stop sharpening the blade. "And what did you hear this time? That you destroyed the fleet because you had no other choice. That you were trying to stop them before they reached a civilian world." She looked at him carefully. "Is it true?" He set the blade down and leaned back. "Parts of it. The truth is never told in full when politics is involved." She tilted, her head. "Then tell me the full truth." For a moment he didn't answer. Then, with a quiet sigh, he began. "We were outnumbered 10-1. Their fleet was faster, better armed. If they reached the world we were protecting, millions would have died. The only way to stop them was to target their fuel carriers. I gave the order. The explosion destroyed their ships, but there were transport vessels among them. Some carried soldiers. Some didn't." Elira's chest tightened. "You mean civilians?" He nodded slowly. "I didn't know until after. By then it was too late. The galaxy remembers the battle as a victory. They call me a hero or a butcher, depending on who you ask. But I don't see it as either. I see it as a failure that lives with me." She looked down at her hands. "And yet, you still fight." "Because I can't undo the past," he said softly. "But I can choose what I do now. I can make sure that if someone's in danger, I stand between them and whatever's coming." She thought back to the jungle trial, to the moment he had stepped in front of her. "That's why you didn't hesitate today." He met her eyes for a brief moment, and she saw it. Something unspoken, a promise he didn't need to voice. "Yes." The silence that followed wasn't uncomfortable. It felt like a quiet understanding had been built between them. After a while, she asked, "Do you ever wonder if you'll be remembered differently?" He gave a faint, humorless smile. "I stopped caring about that a long time ago. I'd rather be remembered by the people I save than by those who write the history books." The wind rustled the leaves of the garden trees. Somewhere above, the faint glow of distant stars shone through the clouds. Elira rose from the bench. "Thank you for telling me the truth." He picked up the blade again. "Truth isn't easy to tell, but it's easier than living with lies." She took a step toward the corridor, then paused. "I was wrong about you, Darius. I don't know if I trust you completely yet, but I don't fear you anymore." He didn't look up, but she thought she saw the corner of his mouth lift slightly. That's a start. The next morning, the palace was alive with activity. The fourth trial was set to be a large-scale strategy exercise, pitting teams of warriors against each other in simulated warfare. Darius was placed as a team leader, much to the surprise of many alien nobles who doubted a human's ability to command mixed forces. Elira watched from the observation deck as the trial began. His leadership was nothing like the others. While most team leaders barked orders and pushed for aggressive attacks, Darius studied the terrain, adapted to the enemy's movements, and used every skill of his team to its fullest. He didn't waste lives. Every maneuver was calculated to protect as well as to win. By the end, his team had not only completed the objective, but had done so with the least casualties in the exercise. The Emperor himself praised him before the crowd. This is what leadership looks like. Not only the will to win, but the wisdom to safeguard your people. As the cheers echoed through the hall, Elira found herself smiling without realizing it. She no longer saw Darius as the figure from the war stories. She saw him as he truly was, a man shaped by his past, but not defined by it. She didn't know what the next trials would bring, but she knew one thing. She wanted to see how far he could go. And for the first time, she wanted him to succeed. The fifth day of the trials began with clear skies over the Valthorian capital. Banners waved above the palace walls, and the grand arena filled with citizens eager to watch the final challenges. The atmosphere was bright, but beneath the surface, tension lingered. Rumors had been spreading of enemy movements near the Empire's borders. Princess Elira stood beside her father on the royal platform, her gaze drifting toward the line of warriors below. Darius was among them, calm and steady. As always, she caught his eye for a brief moment, and though he didn't smile, there was a silent acknowledgement between them. The announcer began to speak, preparing to introduce the day's events, when a sharp alarm suddenly blared across the city. The Emperor's chief guard rushed forward, bowing quickly. "Your Majesty, enemy ships have entered orbit. We are under attack." Panic rippled through the arena. Citizens cried out, and soldiers scrambled to secure the exits. Before the Emperor could give an order, the first explosion shook the air. Distant towers crumbled as enemy bombardments struck the outer districts. Black smoke began to rise over the skyline. "Get the princess to safety!" the chief guard shouted. Elira felt herself being pulled away, but she resisted. "What about my father?" The guard didn't answer. Another blast hit close by, throwing debris across the arena floor. And then, through the chaos, Darius moved. He vaulted over the barrier of the warriors' area, cutting through the panic to reach the royal platform. "With me," he said firmly, looking directly at the Emperor and the princess. The Emperor hesitated for only a moment before nodding. "Lead the way, human." Enemy soldiers had already breached the palace gates. They poured into the arena, their armor black and their weapons humming with deadly energy. Darius didn't waste time. He took a fallen guard's rifle, returning fire with quick, precise shots. He didn't aim to wound. Every shot struck true, clearing their path. They moved quickly through the back corridors of the arena. The air was thick with smoke, and the sound of battle echoed from every direction. Elira kept close behind Darius. She noticed how he constantly checked corners before moving, how his steps were quiet and purposeful even in the chaos. Every time they were about to turn into danger, he adjusted the route without hesitation. At one intersection, a squad of enemy soldiers blocked their way. Darius grabbed the Emperor's arm, pulling him back into cover. "Stay down," he ordered, then moved forward alone. Using the shadows, he slipped behind the squad and took them out one by one, never making more noise than necessary. When the path was clear, he returned. "Move!" They reached a narrow hallway that led toward the palace stronghold, but a sudden explosion collapsed the far end, sealing it off. "We'll have to cut through the eastern courtyard," Darius said, scanning for another route. "It's open ground. We'll need to move fast." As they entered the courtyard, the enemy spotted them. Blaster fire lit the air. Darius moved in front of the Emperor and Princess, his rifle barking in reply. Elira could see his armor burning in places from near hits, but he didn't falter. He kept advancing, step by step, forcing the enemy back until they reached the stronghold's outer doors. Once inside, the heavy gates shut behind them, cutting off the sounds of the battle outside. The Emperor turned to Darius. "You've saved both me and my daughter today. I owe you my life." Darius shook his head. "You don't owe me. My duty is to protect those who can't fight back. The fight isn't over yet." Indeed, the stronghold shook again as enemy forces tried to breach. The guards looked to Darius for direction, and without hesitation, he began organizing the defense, placing sharpshooters at the towers, assigning guards to reinforce the gates, and setting traps along the approach. Elira watched him move through the stronghold like he had been commanding these soldiers his entire life. There was no panic in him, only clear purpose. As the battle raged outside, she stood beside him on the wall. "You could have left the moment the attack started," she said. "You could have escaped the city." He glanced at her. "I told you before. What you think of me doesn't matter, but what I do does." Hours passed before the enemy finally retreated, their ships breaking orbit and disappearing into the dark sky. The capital was damaged, but the palace still stood. When the gates reopened, the city's defenders and citizens gathered to cheer the victory. The Emperor stood before them, his voice carrying across the courtyard. Today the Empire was tested, and today a warrior stood between us and destruction. Darius Kane, human warrior, has shown not only skill, but loyalty, courage, and honor. The crowd roared. Elira found herself smiling, not because of the cheers, but because she knew they were true. As Darius stepped forward, the Emperor placed a hand on his shoulder. "From this day, you are not only welcome in my court, you are a protector of this empire." Elira met his eyes. There was no fear in her now, only respect. And somewhere deep inside, a quiet thought began to take root. Perhaps she had misjudged more than just one man. Perhaps she had misjudged an entire people. The sun rose over the capital, casting golden light over the palace walls. The air still carried the smell of smoke from the attack the day before, but the city was alive again. Repair crews worked in the streets, soldiers patrolled the gates, and banners were being rehung for the final day of the Imperial Alliance trials. Princess Elira stood on the balcony of her chambers, looking over the city. Her thoughts kept returning to the moment in the courtyard when Darius had stood between her and the enemy fire. It was no longer just an image of a warrior. It was the image of a man who had earned her trust, no matter what the stories from the past had said. That morning, the arena was filled once again, though the mood was different. Citizens came not only to watch the trials, but also to see the man who had defended the Emperor and Princess. Whispers filled the stands when Darius entered the field, his armor repaired but still marked by fresh scars from the battle. The Emperor addressed the crowd. Yesterday we faced a threat not part of these games. Yet one among our warriors rose above all others to protect this empire. Today the trials will conclude, not just in skill, but in spirit. The victor must have both. The final challenge was called the Convergence. It combined every skill tested so far, combat, survival, leadership, and strategy, into one massive scenario. All remaining warriors were divided into two armies, tasked with capturing the opposing side's command post. To the surprise of many, Darius was chosen as commander of one army, while a renowned alien warlord, General Kryn, commanded the other. The battle would be fought in a sprawling simulation arena, complete with forests, hills, rivers, and mock fortresses. From the start, Darius moved differently than most commanders. He didn't rush his troops forward in a grand charge. Instead, he broke them into small units, using the terrain to hide their movements. Scouts reported enemy positions while he shifted his forces like pieces on a board. Princess Elira watched from the observation platform, leaning forward every time his strategy unfolded. He was patient, waiting for Kryn to overextend his forces. When that moment came, Darius struck, sending 2 units to hit the flanks while the main force held the center. It wasn't about brute strength. It was about timing. Within an hour, Darius's forces had surrounded Kryn's command post. The warlord fought fiercely, but his position collapsed. The crowd erupted in cheers as the simulation ended. Darius stood in the center of the field, his troops surrounding him, their voices raised in victory. The Emperor rose from his seat. Darius Kane, by skill and by honor, you have earned the title of champion of the Imperial Alliance trials. But more than that, you have earned the trust of this empire. The crowd's cheer grew louder. Elira stepped forward before the ceremony could continue. The entire arena fell silent as she descended from the royal platform and walked toward Darius. Standing before him, she spoke so that all could hear. On the first day of these trials, I asked my father to keep you away from me. I believed the stories that painted you as a man to fear, but I was wrong. Yesterday, you stood between me and death without a moment's hesitation, and every day since these trials began, you have shown not only strength, but restraint and honor. She turned to face the crowd. Let it be known to the Empire and to the galaxy. I trust Darius Kane. As a princess of the Valthorian Empire, I name him Protector of the Royal Family. The Emperor smiled, placing a ceremonial crest in Darius's hands. And with this, your place among us is sealed. Darius bowed his head. Thank you, Your Majesty. Thank you, Princess. Elira met his eyes. No, Darius, thank you for showing me the truth. After the ceremony, the crowd spilled into the streets, celebrating both the trials and the survival of the city. In the quieter halls of the palace, Elira and Darius walked together toward the gardens. You've changed a lot in my eyes, she admitted as they passed under the flowering trees. I used to see only the stories. Now I see the man who lived them and chose to be better. He looked ahead, his voice calm. I didn't come here to change anyone's mind. I came to prove to myself more than anyone else that my past doesn't have to decide my future. You've done that, she said softly. And more. They stopped near the fountain where they had spoken days before. The sound of the water was the same, but everything between them had changed. So, Darius asked, a faint trace of humor in his voice, do you still want me kept far away from you? She smiled. A small but genuine smile. No. I think the safest place in the galaxy is right next to you. They stood there for a moment in silence, the noise of celebration distant in the background. For Darius, the trials had ended, but the real victory was something no title could give. He had earned trust in a place where there had been only fear. And for Elira, the galaxy had grown larger, not because of new borders, but because she had learned that sometimes the most feared warrior could be the one who saved you.